Hey guys, tonight we set off on a journey across deserts, mountains, and ancient cities, all with your belly rumbling and your curiosity piqued. You're tracing the legendary Silk Road, not for silk, not for jade or glass beads, but for food. Imagine the scent of lamb, fat sizzling over open flames, the dry rasp of sand between your teeth, and a wine jug sloshing with something you're not entirely sure was fermented on purpose. You're thousands of miles from home. It's the 2nd century BCE, and if the heat doesn't get you, the goat cheese probably will. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey ID, love to know where you're retuning in from. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into a Persian caravanserai as the sun dips low, burning gold across clay rooftops and tired horses. Traders are unpacking bundles of silk, rolls of paper, and more. Interestingly, sacks of dried lentils, fragrant herbs, and smoked meats wrapped in oiled skins. Your stomach growls. It's been 3 days since your last proper meal, which was a dubious ball of barley paste and some kind of chewy bird jerky that might be once been a pigeon. Now though, things are looking up. The local cook, a round-faced woman with eyes like daggers and arms dusted and cummin, is ladling something thick and steaming into chipped bowls. Lamb and yogurt, she grunts, stabbing a chunk of meat with a splintered ladle. The yogurt is sour fermented goat milk that has developed a temp sharper than your elbow after sleeping on a stone floor. But it's warm, rich, and surprisingly comforting. You dunk a wedge of flatbread in it, watching it go limp from the oily broth, and think, this is almost like stew night at home. If stew night involved questionable mutton and a goat staring at you the whole time, goat products are big around here. They travel well. They ferment easily, and fun fat goat milk was thought to have healing properties by Zoroastrian priests. One Persian general even demanded his soldiers drink it daily, claiming it made their hair grow thicker and dreams more prophetic. Historians still argue whether that's true or just something he made up after a bad hangover. The air is thick with spices: coriander, black cumin, maybe a trace of saffron if you're lucky. There's always a chance the spice pouch got swapped en route. So what you think is turmeric might actually be powdered brick. Either way, it makes the meat taste better. Sort of. The caravanserai is buzzing with dozens of languages. Parthian. You overhear a man in Roman robes asking for olive oil, which gets a laugh from the cooks. This is the desert, not a villa. Someone jokes. Instead, the oils here are from sesame seeds, or sometimes rendered animal fat, which gives every bite a slightly smoky flavor and a slippery plate. By the fire pit, a group of men argue over how best to prepare lentils for long travel. One swears by grinding them into paste and drying the mix into hard cakes. Another claims they're best boiled with vinegar and left to congeal into something resembling dinner. You don't join the debate. You're too focused on the round of goat cheese, handed to you by a passing boy. It smells like feet and feels like chalk, but paired with a smear of fig paste, it's oddly addictive. Travelers here know food is life, quite literally. Starvation is just a few sandstorms away, and preserved foods are currency. Salted fish from the Caspian Sea, dried apricots from the Zagros Mountains, and nuts sealed in oilcloth are all precious cargo. Some merchants even hide their best treats beneath layers of rough wool or clay beads, safe from both spoilage and sticky-fingered tax officials. Speaking of which, tax collectors often accepted food in place of coin. A wheel of sharp cheese could smooth out a customs inspection, especially if the guard had skipped breakfast. There's a story, possibly apocryphal but told with enough conviction, of an Armenian trader who smuggled gold coins inside dried figs. The figs made it through. The trader, unfortunately, did not. Still, tonight you eat well. You curl up beside a fire, your stomach full, head swimming with spice and smoke, and listen to the wind rattle the wooden beams above. Tomorrow, the road will pull you eastward toward deserts, mountains, and who knows what else. But tonight, it's just you, some fermented goat milk, and a very persistent fly trying to land on your bowl. The desert doesn't care that you had a decent meal last night. By sunrise, the wind is already clawing at your robes. Your lips are cracked, and your stomach is regretting the yogurt from 12 hours ago. But you're moving again, trudging across a pale, endless sea of dust and mirages trailing behind a caravan of camels that look as bored as you feel. It's Central Asia now, the land of dry winds, sharp rocks, and somehow, the most tender kebabs you'll ever eat. At nightfall, the group sets up camp behind a crescent-shaped dune. A few tired traders pitch their tents, while others busy themselves over crackling fires. There's meat tonight, mutton, to be exact, cut into chunks and skewered on long metal rods, roasting slowly over open flames. You didn't think much of sheep when this journey began, but now, you'd write poetry about lamb fat sizzling onto hot coals. One of the cooks waves you over, flicking sand off a stone, and handing you a stick of kebab like it's a ceremonial artifact. The meat is crusted with cumin, coriander, and a hint of dried chili pepper. You bite in, and it's smoky, salty, and so perfectly charred you forget for a moment that your feet hurt and you haven tea. You chew slowly while a grizzled merchant explains how these desert kebabs are more than dinner. They re-survival math. See, sheep are easy to herd through rough terrain. You get meat, wool, milk, and, according to one enthusiastic old man, emotional companionship. Historians still argue whether Central Asian nomads actually formed deep bonds with their livestock, or were just projecting loneliness. Either way, kebabs were the prize. A camel nearby grumbles loudly. You glance at it and swear it's giving you side-eye, as if to say, enjoy that. You could be next. Water is scarce, but tea is sacred. Someone produces a dented kettle, fills it with mineral-heavy water from a nearby well, and tosses in bricks of compressed tea leaves. The flavor is bitter, earthy, and sharp with tannins, but with a spoonful of sheep butter mixed in. It becomes thick and almost stew-like. You drink it politely, while your mind replays the phrase sheep butter, like a broken record. Central Asian tea culture is something else. The butter keeps you warm, fills your belly, and supposedly improves stamina. One tale claims that Genghis Khan's warriors drank buttered tea before every battle, believing it gave them strength and made their skin arrow-proof. Historians are still divided on whether this was ritual, necessity, or a particularly greasy placebo. Tonight's meal includes more than just kebabs. There's a stew of root vegetables and dried berries, rehydrated in a pot that's seen better centuries. You poke at a chunk of something beige and mushy, and a trader cheerfully tells you it's dried turnip, or possibly radish, or possibly... It doesn't matter, he says with a grin. They all taste like survival. And speaking of survival, the spices used here do more than flavor. Cumin and coriander help preserve meat. Chili wards off parasites. Garlic keeps away illness and, arguably, unwanted conversation. There's even an ancient recipe floating around that involves coating meat in honey, drying it in the sun, and sprinkling it with crushed rose petals, supposedly used for weddings or bribes. Somewhere near the edge of camp, someone starts singing low, melodic, and haunting. The kind of voice that sounds like it knows loss and dry bones. You sip your tea. The stars are beginning to spark above, and the temperature drops so fast, your breath fought. The cook hands you a round of flatbread blackened around the edges, warm in the middle. You tear it open and tuck a strip of mutton inside. Now it's a wrap. Technically, you've just made the ancient ancestor of the modern gyro, and while it's delicious, you don't linger. The desert wind is curling through the tent flaps, blowing sand into your tea. Somewhere in the distance, a hyena, or maybe it's a trader who's had too much fermented mare's milk. You lay back against a rolled saddlebag, full belly, warm hands, eyes heavy. Today, you've tasted history skewered on metal rods and eaten under stars unchanged for 1,000 years. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, you'll climb. By the time dawn seeps into the sky, pale and bone-chilling, you're already moving again, this time upward. The flat plains of Central Asia give way to something far more dramatic. The Pamir Mountains. Jagged peaks punch into the clouds, and thin air makes every breath feel like it's filtered through a straw. You're not walking so much as gasping forward. And while the views are majestic, kind of endless valleys and sheer cliffs, painters would sell their boots to capture Yuri, more focused on not tripping over a rock and tumbling off history. Esmo's scenic ledge. Luckily, there's motivation. At the next rest stop, just below a snow-slick ridge, your nose catches a familiar sweetness in the air-dried fruit. Specifically, apricots. The real kind, not the sad, artificially colored ones you get in modern trail mix, but sundry leathery, sticky sweet orbs that once hung from trees growing near fresh streams in the valleys below. The high-altitude traders call them golden moons, and they treat them like candy. Apricots are more than just snacks. They're currency, medicine, even offerings to mountain spirits. Some believe that carrying a pouch of apricots keeps away frost. Others say it just keeps morale high enough that you pitch your tent mate off a cliff for snoring. You bite into one, it's dense, tangy, and slightly chewy, tasting like sunshine trapped in skin. You pair it with a chunk of yak cheese, which smells like it's already apologized but isn't quite forgiven. It's hard, aged, and tastes like someone dared a glacier to make dairy. But up here, the body craves fat and salt, and this does the trick. And then there's yak butter. Oh yes, the mountaineers churn it laboriously from yak milk, boil it to remove impurities, and let it solidify into pungent gold. Slather it on flatbread or drop it into tit, warms the belly and clogs your arteries with a kind of noble dignity. Historians still argue whether early Tibetan communities learned yak dairy practices from Silk Road travelers or developed them independently. What's agreed upon is that everyone who eats it seems to make a face. Traders here are tough, weathered cheeks, like cured leather. They wrap their provisions in tightly bound, cloth-dried fruits, fermented barley cakes, blocks of sugar or salt. These aren't just foodstuffs. They're like everything must be portable, durable, and ideally resistant to both mold and marmots. A younger merchant, no older than 20, shows you a trick. He grinds dried apricots with crushed walnuts and packs the mix into little cloth pouches. He calls them trail bombs, you call them energy bites, and wish you had 6 more. As night falls, the wind begins howling over the ridges, and fires are hard to keep lit. So, dinner is simple. More apricots, some cheese, barley porridge thick enough to stand a spoon in, and a tea that smells faintly of mint and pine smoke. A local healer drops a pinch of dried rhubarb root into her cup and tells you it'll keep your insides from freezing. You don't ask for details. Somewhere in the circle, an older man begins recounting a story about a cursed apricot orchard placed down in the valley that once fed thousands, until a storm swept through and turned every tree to ash. He swears it happened. He says the trees were too generous, and the mountain gods got jealous. Historians, they still argue whether it was a real event or a metaphor for either way, you munch your apricot a little slower. The stars tonight feel closer, like you could pluck them down and stir them into your tea. Every breath stings, every bite feels earned, and somehow, the cold sharpens your appreciation for the humble food packed into cracked leather. You wrap yourself in your cloak, slide your boots off, and settle into a nest of old furs and new regrets about that yak cheese. But as the mountain wind sings around the rocks, you realize you're beginning to understand the taste of the Silk Road. And it's strangely orange. You've made it down from the mountains, though your knees feel like they've aged 40 years, and your boots now smell suspiciously like yak. The air is thicker here, warmer, with a faint scent of dust, smoke, and something you haven't smelled in a while. Bread. You're in Samarkand now, or something close to it. The city's a beacon for weary traders, a shimmering mirage made of mosaics and markets and ovens, the kind that churn out endless rounds of bread that could double as shields in a pinch. Flat, round, cratered like the moon, and just as dry, these loaves are everywhere. And yet, you'd arm wrestle a camel to get one fresh off the wall of a ton, because yes, the bread here is cooked by slapping the dough directly onto the inside walls of a blistering clay oven. The result is equal parts miracle and jaw workout. Some loaves are sprinkled with sesame or nigella seeds, others pressed with ornate wooden stamps that leave floral patterns. But no matter how beautiful it looks, don't be fooled. This bread is tough. It was built to survive desert crossings, border inspections, and apparently small-scale construction projects. A trader laughs as he thumps a loaf against his pack. It makes a noise not unlike a drum. Good bread? He grins. Lasts longer than my last marriage. You don't ask for details. These flatbreads are the unsung heroes of the Silk Road. They don't spoil, they don't squish, and when soaked in stew or tea, they become edible again. Kinda. The trick is to not break your teeth on the first bite. Some routes even had official bread stations where local bakers would trade fresh loaves for worn-out ones, which were then crumbled and fed to animals or repurposed into soups. Yestel bread soup was a thing. Mixed with onions, dried herbs, and fermented dairy, it became a kind of porridge. But when you've just walked 40 miles in worn-out sandals, you'll eat anything with salt. The bread culture in Samarkand is legendary. It's said that even the invincible that Timur once refused to leave the city without a cartload of his favorite sesame-covered rounds. There's a fringe theory that some loaves were even used in diplomacy, offered, like peace tokens, wrapped in silk cloth and perfumed with rosewater. Historians still argue whether that was tradition, or just one baker trying really hard to impress the Sultan and his cousin. You're handed a still warm loaf, and it practically burns your fingers. You tear off a chunk, inhale the roasted grain scent, and take a bite. It's crisp at the edges, soft inside, and still steaming. It tastes like heat, wheat, and fleeting happiness. Paired with a smear of fermented walnut paste, it becomes unexpectedly A group of local women prepare another type of bread, thin, stretched dough rolled into layers and baked until flaky. It's almost a proto-paratha, filled with ground lentils or mashed chickpeas. You watch as they knead and stretch and laugh and gossip about whose bread sells fastest in the bazaar. It's not the dough. One says, it's the hands. You make a mental note to never challenge her to arm wrestling. There's a kind of reverence around bread. Some won't eat it without first kissing it. Others never place it face down. Dropping a loaf is considered deeply unlucky, bad enough that you're expected to pick it up. Kiss it and place it somewhere safe, like on a clean cloth or high shelf. Bread isn't just food, it's a prayer you chew. Later that night, your dinner is simple. A clay bowl of lamb broth, thick with barley and turnips, and torn bits of flatbread soaking in the surface like edible sponges. You scoop it up with your fingers, feel it dissolve on your tongue, and realize something profound. This bread does travel better than you. You lean back, warmed from the inside out, and listen to the quiet hum of a nearby lute. The night air smells of smoke and cumin, and the stars above feel just a bit softer than they did in the mountains. You've left Samarkand behind, the scent of bread and cumin fading in the dust behind your caravan. The terrain flattens, stretching out into a wide, dry openness where wind races across the ground like it has somewhere very important to be. The sun is high and sharp, turning every surface into a mirror of heat. Somewhere between nowhere and Nakwachina, your thoughts wander toward dinner, and tonight, dinner is noodles, but not just any noodles. Hand-pulled, chewy, stretched like edible ribbon dancers. You've arrived in the regions bordering western China, where wheat reigns and the pasta debate simmers hotter than your forehead under the sun. The cook tonight is an elderly man with hands that look like they've kneaded dough since the Han Dynasty. He slaps a lump of flour and water onto a wooden table, sprinkles a little ash-colored flour over it, and begins to pull and stretch. Like some hypnotic performance art, the dough splits and stretches into dozens of perfect rope-like strands. You blink, and suddenly it's a bowl of noodles. The dish they prepare is Lanzhou style, though it probably hasn't been called that yet. The broth is beef-based, dark and glossy, poured over the noodles with slices of radish, chili oil, and a generous handful of spring onion. You slurp it up, trying not to burn your tongue or your dignity. And here's where the great noodle mystery comes in. Who invented pasta? Chinese records speak of noodles as early as 4,000 years ago. But Italy, of course, lays claim to the spaghetti throne. Some even say Marco Polo brought noodles from China to Venice, though most historians roll their eyes at that and quietly judge your 8th grade history teacher. Historians still argue whether East or West deserves the noodle crown or if they both just figured out at some point that flour plus water equals happiness. Tonight's noodles are topped with something curious, shreds of preserved vegetable that crunch between your teeth. Pickled mustard greens, perhaps? Or maybe dried cabbage that's been soaked in vinegar, garlic, and who knows what since the last lunar eclipse. It's mouth-puckering but refreshing, and likely accidental. The Silk Road was full of such happy accidents. Someone forgot to refrigerate something. Someone else got creative with fermentation, and suddenly a new dish was born. There is a myth around here about a woman who left noodles soaking overnight in meat broth and came back to find them swollen, infused with flavor, and suspiciously irresistible. She fed them to a passing merchant who liked them so much. He spread the recipe along the trade route, claiming it had medicinal properties and romantic side effects. No proof, obviously, but fun to imagine. As you eat, someone passes around another variation. Noodles stir-fried with sesame oil, bits of mutton, and a handful of something crunchy that might be peanuts, or possibly roasted chickpeas. The flavors are layered, nutty, savory, slightly sweet. You'd ask for the recipe if you thought anyone here wrote anything down. Nearby, 2 travelers are deep in a debate over dumplings. One claims meat-stuffed parcels are superior, citing convenience in the way they hug the flavor. The other swears by noodle soups. Their argument drifts into philosophical territory. Is a dumpling just a folded noodle with ambition? Are noodles simply deconstructed dumplings? You're too busy chewing to contribute. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some early noodle recipes weren't even boiled. They were steamed in baskets or even baked flat, like proto-lasagna. In fact, travelers from the Roman Empire who made it this far were often shocked by how similar some Chinese wheat dishes were to their own homeland staples. Bread, dumplings, noodles, they all seem to have evolved parallel to one another. Proof that when humans get hungry enough, they get creative with flour. You watch the cook stretch a fresh batch of noodles under the stars, silhouetted against a flickering fire. The strands flutter in the breeze like musical strings, each one a little uneven, a little imperfect, and that's part of the charm. You finish your bowl, wipe your hands on your robe, and lie back against your pack. The moon glows above like a giant dumpling waiting to be steamed. Your stomach is full, your heart a little lighter, and your lips still tingling from chili oil. Somewhere behind you, someone's slurping loudly. Somewhere ahead of you, more noodles await. The road stretches on, but at least now you're fueled by ancient carbs and questionable pickles. You reach the Sichuan Basin, after days of uneven travel, where the land flattens again but pulses with life-green rice paddies stretching into the mist fields of bamboo, swaying gently in distant sounds of people bargaining over fish bundles of greens and baskets of rice. Here, everything smells like steam, smoke, and soy sauce, humid, heady, and just shy of overwhelming. Your robes feel damp the moment you arrive, and your appetite returns with suspicious eagerness. This region lush, temperamental, bursting with flavors, the kind of place where rice isn't just food, it's the rhythm of daily life, the foundation of nearly every meal, and sometimes, even an offering to the ancestors. A bowl of plain white rice here is more sacred than gold in some circles. Which is ironic, considering how often it's paired with spicy fish heads or questionable pickled vegetables. You settle in beside a bamboo shack perched on the riverbank. An old woman with no teeth and a laugh like a creaky wheel plunks down a bowl of something steaming. Rice, of course, fluffy and sticky enough to hold chopsticks upright. But the tapia? That's the mystery. Shredded pork. Maybe? Sliced mushroom? Possibly? Rat? Also, not impossible. You glance around. No one seems alarmed, and the meat is tender, marinated, and spiced so generously that you decide not to ask questions. It's delicious, slightly sweet, deeply umami, with a hint of Szechuan peppercorn that numbs your tongue in the strangest, most delightful way. You're officially in Sichuan cuisine territory now, where flavor isn't a suggestion, it's an onslaught. People here embrace spice like a personality trait. Dishes glisten with red oil, pepper flakes, ginger, and garlic. One loco tells you, with complete sincerity, that sweating through your meal means it's working. Working toward what they don't say. Rice, meanwhile, continues to rule the table. Steamed, congee style, fried with eggs and garlic, or wrapped in lotus leaves and steamed again. It shows up in every form imaginable, and it's more than just a food. In lean times, even the water it was boiled and milky and starchy was consumed as a kind of life-giving soup. There's a common story around here, almost too poetic to be true. During a particularly harsh famine, a village survived on nothing but rice-washing water. They drank it in silence, grateful for the ghost of starch. Whether that happened or not, historians still argue, but the tale lingers like steam in the air. Tonight's meal grows stranger. A bamboo tray is placed in front of you, filled with delicacies of varying mystery: braised eggplant, pickled garlic, fried tofu skin, and something that looks like a bundle of twigs. You bite when it's lotus root, actually, crisp and earthy. Another surprise win. But then comes a skewer of meat, dark, glossy, charred at the edges. You bite in. It's tender, smoky, slightly gamey. The cook grins and says, "Field rat." You pause. Mid-chew? Is it a joke? Is it not? It's hard to say. You finish the bite anyway, because politeness is stronger than fear. Rats, it turns out, aren't unheard of in this part of the Silk Road. In times of scarcity there were many people turned to what was available. River rats, rice field rodents, even the occasional squirrel were caught, skinned, and cooked with such skill that you probably wouldn't know the difference. Some emperors, in fact, were said to enjoy the meat of certain wild rodents, claiming it gave them strength. Others just liked the challenge. Even in times of abundance, there's a deep appreciation here for using everything. Every stem, every bone, every organ. Waste is a luxury only the rich can afford. You watch a cook stir-fried chicken, gizzards with green onions, balancing them on a cracked wok over firewood that smells faintly of citrus. The result? Crunchy, salty, addictive, and slightly unsettling. And the rice keeps coming. You try a sweet version next. Sticky rice steamed with red dates and drizzled with syrupy plum sauce. A dessert that sticks to your fingers and your memories. It's a quiet finish to a loud meal. As the night settles over the misty basin, you sit by the river, bowl in hand, reflecting on the day. You've eaten mystery meat, conquered mouth-numbing spice, and gained a whole new appreciation for the humble grain that fuels empires. Somewhere in the reeds, a frog croaks approvingly. Tomorrow, the terrain changes again. But tonight, the rhythm of rice carries you gently into sleep. The path curves northward now, winding past old villages built of baked mud and timber, where roofs sag with the weight of age and memories. It's cooler again, drier, and dust clings to your sleeves like a second skin. You trudge on, your pack lighter than it should be because most of your supplies have either been eaten or shared. What's left? Pickles. Lots of pickles. Yes, you've entered the preserve stage of the journey. In these northern towns, where winters bite hard and fresh produce can vanish for months at a time, pickling isn't just a culinary choice, it's insurance. Turnips, cabbages, radishes, even garlic, bulbs, everything is sliced, salted, brined, buried, dried, or stored in clay jars under floorboards. If it can be pickled, someone has tried. Your first taste comes from a friendly man who insists you try what he calls the pride of his grandmother-esque clay cellar. He unscrews a sealed jar with dramatic flair, unleashing an aroma that's part vinegar, part memory. Inside, glistening, yellow cubes of pickled turnip, floating in a dark, murky liquid that looks vaguely medicinal. You try a piece, crunchy, sour, salty, a little sweet, a little alarming, but it wakes you up faster than coffee ever could. These preserved vegetables were the unsung fuel of Silk Road caravans. Light, durable, immune to spoilage, and weirdly addictive once your taste buds surrendered. Long before refrigeration, preservation was an art and pickling was king. There are stories of ancient travelers who carried nothing but dried meat, flatbread, and a pouch of pickled garlic cloves for weeks. The garlic was believed to boost strength, ward off illness, and repel both bandits and close conversation. Historians still argue whether this was rooted in actual health benefits or just really effective garlic breath. The pickled variety plate expands rapidly. Carrots steeped in honeyed vinegar, cucumbers with dill and chili flakes, cabbage soured until it practically bites you back. One merchant even offers you pickled plum paste wrapped in grape leaves. It's good for your joints, he says. You take his word for it and keep chewing. A quirky little practice emerges around the campfire: pickle gambling. Yes, really. Each night, traders take turns daring each other to eat whatever comes out of the oldest, most mysterious jar in the wagon. The loser buys the next meal, or in one poor soul's case, ends up scrubbing camel tack for a week. You're offered a spot in a game, you politely decline. They laugh and hand you a tame sliver of pickled daikon instead. Some pickles are, oddly enough, considered luxury goods. The fermented mustard tubers from certain regions are so prized they were once traded for bolts of silk. One version is said to be aged for 7 years in tightly sealed pots before being deemed worthy of sale. Like garlic, thunder, and regret, but in a good way. You hear a tale from a local grandmother of a ghost pickle, a legendary root vegetable said to only be found by accident buried in the wrong jar, fermented by wild yeast and tasting like the moment before a lightning strike. No one's ever proven it exists. Historians mostly chalk it up to folklore and questionable foraging habits. Tonight, Estena is humble but comforting. Boiled millet porridge and a selection of pickles so colorful it looks like a painter. Espala. Some spicy, some sweet, some sharp enough to make your eyelid twitch. But somehow, it works. Especially when your body is running on tired legs, dry bread, and stubborn willpower. As you sit and eat with a handful of fellow travelers, you realize how crucial these tangy little side dishes really are. They add brightness, flavor, and a much-needed zing to an otherwise dreary road diet. They keep you awake. They keep you alert. They remind you that somewhere, someone thought long and hard about how to make vegetables last just a little longer. And in a world where preservation meant survival, that was everything. You wrap the last sliver of carrot in a bit of flatbread, chew slowly, and lean back. The stars blink down. Your breath smells like vinegar. Your heart, strangely, feels warm. The desert returns without warning, creeping in like a thief, slowly replacing the green with beige and the breeze with heat. You cross into the outskirts of the Takalamakanda, desert of death, as some call it, with sand so fine it sneaks into your ears, your socks, and your deepest regrets. The air tastes like dust and mirage, but surprisingly, it also tastes like honey. You've stumbled into one of those strange, in-between placessa dusty oases that seems to exist only because someone refused to die here. And around the fire that night, instead of dried bread or pickled roots, you're handed something magical. A cup of honeyed wine. It's warm, golden, fragrant, with herbs, and possibly stronger than the structural integrity of your liver. The sweet syrup glides down your throat, burns your chest just slightly, and settles in your stomach like liquid comfort. One sip, and you forget, briefly, that your skin is coated in sand and you haven't seen a vegetable in 2 days. The wine is made from fermented local fruit dates, perhaps, or apricot sweetened with thick honey collected from highland hives. It's not mass-produced. It's not even consistent. Each batch varies depending on who stirred it, what herbs they threw in, and whether the jar sat in the sun too long. But it works. Oh, it works. Beside you, a trader passes around a platter of what he dramatically refers to as desert snacks. You brace yourself for dried goat intestines or salted beetles, but know these are actual insects. Yes, but they're lightly oiled, toasted until crisp, and sprinkled with salt. Beetle bites. Crunchy, nutty, alarmingly Moorish. It crunches like a peanut shell. The flavor is oddly savor-like. Roasted almond with a hint of sagebrush. Not bad. Not good either. But definitely not bad. Insects were a staple out here, whether people talked about it or not. Locusts, beetles, ants and anything with protein and a decent crunch. Dried, fried, or ground into paste. Some caravans carried jars of powdered insect protein, mixed it with honey, and spread it on today's high-protein energy bar walks so these could run. Historians still argue whether this was a Silk Road-wide practice or something developed only in the most isolated desert outposts. Either way, it's practical and oddly tasty. You're handed another round of snacks, this time roasted melon seeds and dried mulberries. The sweetness surprises you. It's gentle, natural, and just enough to counterbalance the savory grit of everything else. These little things, seeds, berries, dried figs, served as both sustenance and morale boosters. A handful in the pocket was better than gold on some days. There's a fringed tale you hear around the fire, told in the low voice of a woman wearing silver bangles up both arms. She talks of a traveling chef who created a dish so good some kind of candied grasshopper and plum sauce that a warlord offered him safe passage and 10 camels in exchange for the recipe. The warlord later got food poisoning. The two events, she insists, were definitely related. Your hosts offer one final treat. They're small, dense, packed with dried fruits and nuts, and sweet enough to make your teeth tingle. The honey binds everything together: flour, sesame, fragments of dried ginger. These cakes travel well. They fill your stomach and don't go bad. And when dipped in tea or wine, they soften into little pillows of joy. You eat too. Okay, 3. The night deepens, and the fire crackles low. Someone plays a flute off-key, but earnestly, while others sip wine and argue about caravan routes. Above, the stars feel enormous, closer than they should be. Maybe that's the wine, or maybe it's just how the desert humbles, you stripping away everything but the essentials. Fire, food, stories. You curl up near the embers with a wool blanket over your shoulders, honey still clinging to your teeth. The last thing you hear before sleep takes you is a beetle crunching under someone's foot, and the slow, satisfied sigh of a man who's clearly had one cup too many. Sweet dreams, you think. The sands eventually release you, spitting you out like a seed from the belly of the your boots are worn down to whispers. Your throat tastes like sandpaper, and your stomach is ready for anything that didn't come out of a jar or scuttle across your sleeping mat. Fortunately, the Silk Road now threads into the Gansu-Carretera greenish lifeline, hemmed in by mountains and cliffs, guiding you toward the Han Chinese heart. And here, something miraculous happens. You smell noodles again, but not just any noodles. These are pan-fried, smoky, golden-edged strands sizzling in oil on a flat iron plate. You watch the Kuke spry woman in her 50s, with arms that could bench press a water, buffalo toast the noodles with vegetables. Slivers of pork and something aromatic that smells like spring onion and soy sauce had a passionate affair in a wok. You sit cross-legged on a mat and dive in. It's blistering hot and oily, and exactly what your tired soul needed. And, yes, you burn your tongue. Of course you do, but it's worth it. The food in the corridor shifts, as much as the land. Suddenly there's more variety, more confidence. Chickens run loose behind tea stalls. Vegetables grow in clustered rows just beyond town walls. The flavors are more balanced, here still spicy. Yes, but also sour, sweet, salty, and bitter, each making its case. On your tongue, one bowl of soup even manages to do all five at once. You're not sure if it's delicious or confusing, but you eat the entire thing just to be safe. The Han Dynasty influence is strong here. Fermented bean paste appears in everything: broths, marinades, even snacks. One trader hands you what looks like a steamed bun, only to reveal a dark, savory filling that smells vaguely of mischief. You bite in. It's sweet red bean paste, not meat. Your brain screams, but your mouth doesn't hate it. You are now entering the phase of the Silk Road journey where fermentation is no longer an act of desperation, it's art. Take dough bench, for instance. A spicy fermented bean paste made with broad beans and chili, aged in clay pots under sun and time. It's bold, complex, and one of the cornerstones of Sichuan and Gansu cuisine. Some say it was first created by accident when beans were left too long in a broken pot, then eaten out of sheer hunger. Others claim it was developed deliberately as a way to preserve flavor in lean seasons. Historians still argue whether the original inventors were geniuses or just incredibly hungry gamblers. Along the roadside, you find vendors selling dried tofu sheet, layered, and ready to soak up any sauce they're tossed in. One man tosses some in hot oil with leeks and ginger, then wraps the whole thing in flatbread like a spiced tofu burrito. You inhale it. You consider another. For dessert, someone hands you a slice of steamed sponge cake made with rice flour and brown sugar. It's light, fluffy, just sweet enough to lift your mood without making you suspicious. You bite into it, and finally, you understand what people mean when they say comfort food. It doesn't hurt that you're sitting on an actual bench for once. Later that evening, around a shared fire, traders swap food stories instead of gossip. One recalls a fermented egg that exploded in its jar and nearly ended a deal. Another swears he once ate a dumpling so good he proposed marriage to the cook on the spot. She laughed in his face, handed him a second dumpling, and walked away. Tonight's meal, a kind of hot pot broth simmering in a shared clay cauldron, into which everyone drops their contributions. Tofu, mushrooms, greens, chunks of lamb, fermented turnip, even a rogue boiled egg. You contribute a slightly crumpled piece of dried fish. No one judges. The flavors blend. The steam raises, the warmth spreads, and it's communal. Everyone eats together. No one's food is better than anyone else's, because everything swims in the same broth, softening, mingling, transforming, like the Silk Road itself. You lean back, belly full, face warmed by the fire and broth and laughter. You're not just eating history anymore, you're cooking in it. Simmering slowly, absorbing flavor, steeping in centuries. And somewhere beyond the mountains lies Shi. But tonight, that can wait. At last, you arrive in the bustling city of Chang'an, the eastern terminus of the Silk Road and one of the largest cities the ancient world has ever known. Here, the narrow winding streets pulsed with life vendors shouting, children darting between carts, and the aroma of every spice you can imagine, along with some you can't. You immediately enveloped in a sensory overload that feels like a carnival and a bazaar rolled into one. Food is everywhere. Steaming buns, skewers of grilled meat, fresh fruit piled high on carts, and bowls of thick porridge served in small clay cups. The city's vibrant food culture is an exotic tapestry woven from the many peoples who passed through the Persians. One of the most popular street foods is the mud, a fluffy steamed bun sometimes stuffed with pork or vegetables, sometimes plain. It's simple, comforting, and the perfect handheld meal for traders on the go. You bite into one filled with braised pork that melts on your tongue. It's savory, slightly sweet, and wrapped in a pillowy embrace. It's impossible to resist, but it's not just the staples that impress. You're also introduced to a delicacy called persimmon cake made from dried persimmons pounded into a sticky, sweet treat that was often given as gifts or eaten during festivals. The texture is somewhere between jelly and fruit leather, and it tastes like autumn sunshine wrapped in sugar. Another local favorite is the dragonbeard candy, spun from fine strands of sugar and maltose that dissolve in your mouth like fairy floss, but with the satisfying crunch of peanuts and sesame seeds inside. Watching a candy maker pull and fold the sugary threads is mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. You try some and immediately wish you'd bought a whole basket. Changanas Market also offers exotic spices: saffron from Persia, cloves from India, and black peppercorns from far south. These flavors were so prized, they sometimes doubled as currency. Traders joked that a pinch of black pepper could buy you a night's lodging or a new camel saddle. Historians still debate how much these exotic spices influence local cuisine. Some argue they transformed it entirely, introducing bold new flavors and cooking techniques. Others suggest they were limited to the wealthy elite or special occasions, with common folk sticking to simpler fare. For dinner, you're invited to a banquet hosted by a Silk Road merchant. The table groans under the weight of dishes: stewed lamb with apricots, spiced rice, pilaf, greens, and delicate dumplings filled with minced meat and herbs. The flavors are rich, complex, and layered, reflecting the mingling of cultures that the Silk Road brought together. You notice a dish that looks peculiar: pigeon eggs, boiled in soy sauce and spices. It's a delicacy here, believed to boost vitality and luck. You're skeptical, but take a bite. Surprisingly, it's creamy, savory, and utterly addictive. As the evening wears on, the host pours sweet rice wine, warm and fragrant with hints of chrysanthemum and ginger. The conversation flows as freely as the wine, stories exchanged in a mixture of languages, punctuated by laughter and the occasional shout. Outside, lanterns glow softly, illuminating the narrow alleys and reflecting in the canals that crisscross the city. The night is alive with possibility, and you feel for the first time a deep connection to the people and flavors of the Silk Road, not just as a traveler or observer, but as a participant in this ancient ongoing feast. You finally lie down on a straw mat beneath a silk canopy, your stomach full and your mind swirling with spices, stories, and the endless roads still ahead. You awake to the distant call of merchants and the clatter of carts rolling over cobblestone streets. Changan's early morning market is alive with chatter, scents, and vibrant colors. Among the stalls, the air is thick with the rich aroma of black tea, freshly brewed and poured into delicate porcelain cups. The drink is a relatively new introduction to the Silk Road diet, but it has already become indispensable, a warming ritual that sharpens your senses before the day's travel. Black tea, it turns out, was more than just a beverage. In many Silk Road cultures, it was medicinal, social, even spiritual. Some caravans brewed it with yak butter and salt, creating a creamy, energizing concoction, perfect for high-altitude treks. Others preferred it sweetened with honey or infused with herbs. Historians still argue whether the practice of adding butter to tea originated in Tibet or Central Asia, but everyone agrees it's an acquired taste like yak cheese, but liquid. You're soon lured by the sight of a vendor, expertly preparing steamed rice dumplings, or wrapped tightly in bamboo leaves. These parcels are stuffed with sticky rice, meat, mushrooms, or sweet beans. The aroma is intoxicating, a perfect balance of earthiness and savory richness. You bite into one and feel the steam warm, your mouth the rice tender, the filling bursting with flavor. Nearby, a group of children chase each other around a stall, selling sugar-coated hawthorn berries. These bright red treats sparkle in the morning sun, tart and sweet at once, with a crunch that makes you smile despite the dust and exhaustion. They're called tanghula, and they're an early example of the Silk Road's sweet tooth. Breakfast wouldn't be complete without congee, a rice porridge so common it's nearly invisible until you taste it. It's simple, soothing, sometimes flavored with pickled vegetables or salted duck eggs. It's the kind of meal that feels like a warm hug, especially on cold mornings or after long nights. You watch as a merchant unwraps a block of fermented soybean cake, its pungent aroma cutting through the bustling market air like a declaration. It's salty, tangy, and immensely satisfying to those accustomed to its bite. Fermented soy products like this were vital protein sources and flavor boosters throughout the Silk Road region, and their preparation was considered something of an art form. Some ancient texts describe fermentation methods so secretive they were guarded like treasure. Historians still debate the extent to which these techniques traveled along the trade routes versus evolving independently. Your breakfast is rounded out with dried fruit, dates, figs, and mulberries, the kind that have traveled hundreds of miles just like you. Their sticky sweetness is a reminder that even on the road, nature's candy is never far away. As you finish, a troupe of performers arrives: jugglers, musicians, storytellers. Their colorful costumes and lively acts contrast sharply with the dusty streets, bringing a spark of joy and humanity to the relentless pace of trade. The Silk Road isn't just a route for goods. It's a crossroads of culture, taste, and stories. And this morning, market captures all of that in a handful of bites and sights. You sip your black tea again, feeling the warmth spread through your chest. The road beckons, but for a moment, you savor the here and now. You move on from Chang'an with your belly full and your pack heavier, not with gear, but with stories, recipes, and half-finished snacks wrapped in cloth. The road eastward softens. Fields stretch in neat patterns, and villages become more frequent. The air carries the scent of fresh grain and damp soil. This is farming, country rice paddies, wheat plots, and barley fields rolling to the horizon. You walk through a landscape that quite literally feeds the empires. In these quieter, agrarian regions, the food takes a different tone, humble, nourishing, deeply tied to the land and the seasons. You arrive in a village where the smell of fresh soybean milk drifts from a stone building with steam curling from the roof. Inside, a family prepares a morning meal of the Chinese street crepe made from mung bean flour, eggs, scallions, and sometimes a smear of fermented chili paste or sweet hoisin. It's hot, chewy, crisp at the edges, and absolutely perfect. You fold it into thirds and bite down as the flavors blend savory, spicy, and just a touch sweet from the sauce. You instantly understand why people line up for these at dawn and how a simple pancake can fuel a day of hard labor. Soy, here, is more than a bean. It's a miracle. Pressed into milk, curdled into tofu, fermented into paste, or dried into skin-like sheets, it appears in countless forms. One farmer you meet shows you how they hang tofu skins on bamboo poles to dry in the wind. When reheated and stir-fried, they mimic meat so convincingly you do a double take. You're invited to a small lunch under a canopy of woven reeds. It's seasonal and medicinal of steamed rice, greens, and thin slices of tofu cooked with garlic and fermented black beans. There's no meat today, but the flavors don't need it. Each bite sings of simplicity and balance. There's an herbal soup, tulip broth, bits of seaweed, and threads of egg drifting like lazy clouds. The cook tells you the herbs were gathered from nearby hills and insists that keep your liver calm. You take her word for it. After the meal, you're offered sun-dried persimmons, leathery and speckled, with natural sugar bloom. They taste like caramel and earth, and you chew them slowly as the village children play with kites, shaped like birds and dragons. The sky is clear, the wind is kind, and here as a curiosity, one of the elders brews sorghum liquor in a clay still behind his home. He offers you a taste in a tiny ceramic cup. It smells like gasoline and truth. You sip it. It hits your brain like a gong and evaporates behind your eyes. You cough once, then twice. He beams and calls you a true You believe him because you're too dizzy to argue. As the day stretches, you're told about a curious tradition making tea, eggs for festivals and long journeys. Eggs are boiled, then cracked, and steeped again in a dark, fragrant brew of black tea, soy sauce, cinnamon, and star anise. The result is a marbled egg that smells like a spice merchant's dreams. You're handed one from a basket wrapped in cloth, still warm. It's soft, flavorful, and deeply comforting. Evening comes, and you're re-led to a small barn where the family has set up dinner on low wooden tables. They serve stir-fried barley noodles, thicker than what you had before, tossed with cabbage and ginger. It's rustic, hearty, and just chewy enough to remind you of the mountain paths behind you. You lean back, belly full of humble grains and soft-spoken spices, and realize something. Not all feasts are loud or lavish. Some come quietly, through soil and steam, in the hands of people who cook because that's what the land has taught them to do. Outside, crickets chirp in the rice paddies. A breeze carries the smell of damp earth and cut grass. And for the first time in days, you don't hear a single camel, just the steady, peaceful breath of a land that feeds itself, and, generously, you follow the winding path south now, where the air grows thicker and the landscape erupts in green. Rivers carve through valleys, rice paddies shimmer under the sun, and bamboo groves rattle like wooden wind chimes. You're heading into the lands once reached by maritime branches of the Silk Road, the humid, verdant regions of Yun and beyond, where borders blur and every meal seems borrowed, reinvented, or hidden in a banana leaf. And here, rice takes center stage again, but not the dry, fluffy mounds of the north. No. Here, rice sticks to everything. It's sticky, glutinous, and endlessly transformed into cakes, dumplings, balls, and rolls. It's soaked, steamed, fermented, or pounded into submission with wooden hammers and two people yelling in rhythm. Your first encounter is with a humble street vendor preparing bamboo rice, a mixture of sticky rice, mushrooms, tiny bits of fatty pork, and fermented bean curd, all stuffed into hollow bamboo tubes. These are sealed with leaves and slow roasted over a smoky fire. When cracked open, the scent is divine, earthy, warm, and faintly sweet. The bamboo has flavored the rice with a hint of something green and ancient. You eat with your hands, licking sticky grains from your fingertips, like a proper In this region, wild herbs and foraged greens are folded into meals with intuitive ease. You walk through a village where the air smells of citrus and fresh-cut grass, and a woman invites you to taste her specialty. Sticky rice steamed in banana leaves, with fresh herbs, peanuts, and sesame. It's soft, chewy, and tastes like a forest picnic. Later, in a cooler mountain town nestled in the mists, you're given a bowl of crossing the bridge noodles. It's served in stages: a bowl of steaming broth, a plate of thin raw meats, greens, pickles, and slippery rice noodles. You slide everything into the soup and watch it cook right there in front of you like magic. But soup, the name comes from an old folk tale of a woman who brought hot food across a bridge to her studying husband every day. Whether real or not, historians still argue over its origin, but it tastes like effort and love, which is close enough. Even fermentation changes here. Pickles are still present, but now you're tasting things like sour bamboo shoots, fermented fish pastes, and strange fizzy teas. You're handed a jar of pu'er tea, aged and compressed into dense cakes. The brew is dark, earthy, and carries notes of wet leaves, smoke, and something you can't quite name. It tastes like a cave smells if that cave also taught philosophy. It's said that aged pu'er is worth its weight in silver, especially if stored in the proper mountain humidity for decades. You sipped carefully, aware that you may be drinking something older than your country. One night, you're fed a grilled fish coated in a paste of fermented chili and wild mountain herbs. It's smoky, spicy, sour, and it bites back. The cook claims it wards off ghosts, illness, and annoying neighbors. You eat every bite and sleep soundly. And in the markets you see things you've never imagined. Stacks of insects, larvae, skewers, grilled and dusted with cumin. Fermented tofu cubes stored in chili oil so bright it could start a fire. Translucent rice jelly cakes topped with flower petals and syrup. You try them all, because that's what you do now. You are the sort of person who eats jelly topped with flowers and pretends to understand the symbolism. One morning your breakfast is a bowl of sweet rice porridge cooked with red beans and jujubes, the sticky grains almost pudding-like in texture. It's warm, gently, sweet, and heavy in a way that makes you slow down and appreciate the silence of a mist-covered rice terrace. You don't just taste the food here, you feel it. In your hands, your chest, your pace. Everything's slower, richer, softer. Meals aren't just eaten. They're shared, layered, and steeped in ritual. And though you're far from where you began, something about this place, the soft rice, the fog, the faint bitterness of old tea makes it feel like the end of something, or at least the beginning of a quieter chapter. You press onward, a little stickier, a little wiser, and a lot more full. You descend once more from the mountains, the mist giving way to plains, and the occasional rush of tropical warmth. The land is softened, but the sky feels larger, wide, open, unpredictable. You're nearing the southern coastal edges of the Silk Road now, where food merges. Not just cultures, but climates. This is the land of wet monsoons, sea breezes, and markets that never sleep. You arrive in a port town buzzing with the clamor of trade ships bobbing in the harbor, nets drying in the sun, and the briny smell of the ocean drifting through the narrow alleys. Here, food is built on fish and spice, rice and citrus, and above all, motion influences arriving daily from India, Southeast Asia, the islands beyond. Your first meal is a revelation. Grilled fish marinated in lemongrass, galangal, and fermented bean sauce, wrapped in banana leaves, and slow roasted over coals. It crackles when you open the parcel. Steam rushes out, followed by a tangy mouth-watering scent that makes you forget every pickle you've ever eaten. The fish is soft, fragrant, and practically glows from the turmeric. You don't speak the cook's dialect, but your face tells him everything. Seafood dominates the markets. You see dried squid, coiled like parchment, salt-cured anchovies, and shrimp pastes so pungent they might be outlawed in certain polite societies. And of course, there's rice still ever present, but cooked differently now. Steamed in coconut milk, fried with tamarind, pressed into balls with shredded coconut and sweetened mung bean. You're handed a triangular bundle wrapped in palm leaf. Inside, sticky rice, ground shrimp, and a sliver of salted egg yolk. The combination shouldn't work. It does. It really, really does. Here, fermentation gets louder: fish sauce, soy sauce, shrimp paste, tamarind pulp. Some of these have traveled the Silk Road in small clay vessels, sealed in wax and protected like treasure. Others were born right here and never left, because they didn't need to. The people came instead. One night, you're invited aboard a trading junk, docked in the harbor. A group of sailors sit cross-legged, sharing bowls of congee topped with fried shallots and slivers of pickled mango. You've had congee before: mild, soothing, sleepy, but this version is electric, with spice, crunch, and unexpected brightness. They wash it down with rice wine so cloudy it looks like moonlight in a bowl. You retold that every ship keeps a small sea kitchen, a box of preserved roots, dried seafood, spice mixtures, and sauces. It's a sailor's pantry, passed down through captains and cooks, never fully written down. Some mixtures are considered family secrets, some are probably just expired. Historians still argue whether these trade pantries influenced inland cuisine, or whether port cities developed their bold flavors on their own. Either way, it's delicious. By now, your palate has grown, adventurous. You nibble fermented jackfruit salad with red chili. You devour a curry of slow-braised beef, with cinnamon and star anise. Served over short grain rice and garnished with crispy garlic and lime. You even try a spoonful of something called black sauce that tastes like licorice and lava. You still don't know what it was. Dessert tonight is light but unforgettable. Palm sugar syrup poured over shaved ice, topped with rice, jelly, mung beans, and slivers of tropical fruit. You eat it slowly, letting the cold melt down your throat like a sigh after a long day. And throughout it all, there's tea. Strong, dark, sometimes served cold with lime and honey, sometimes steeped with herbs that make your eyes water. One vendor insists his blend keeps sailors awake through typhoons. You believe him. You also buy a pouch for the road. You end the evening on the docks, feet dangling over the water, the smell of grilled squid and jasmine in the air. A child offers you a handful of candied ginger, and you chew it thoughtfully while the tide rises. Everything here is humid, spicy, slightly salty, and full of life. The food speaks with accents, sings in high notes, and doesn't apologize. And neither do you not anymore. You've come too far, tasted too much, and learned that the Silk Road doesn't end, it just feeds itself back into the world. You fall asleep to the lull of waves and laughter and distant singing, and your dreams, they taste like lemongrass, coconut, and honey. You find yourself now on a small coastal boat, bobbing gently on a still inlet. The Silk Road Essendor, one of its many ends, is no longer a landlocked city or a desert pass, but an open tide, with wind in your face and brine in your hair. You lean against the wooden rail, watching the wake curl behind you like a silk ribbon unraveling across the sea. A fisherman nearby is preparing breakfast over a coal stove the size of a shoebox. It's nothing fancy, just millet porridge, with dried scallops and ginger, but the scent draws you like a magnet. He ladles a steaming bowl into your hands and sprinkles over dried seaweed, spring onion, and a few drops of fragrant sesame oil. You slurp it while the boat rocks, warm and balanced and surprisingly elegant. The sea traders along these coastlines live off what they catch and what they carry. Their food is deeply practical but laced with improvisation. Last night's fish becomes this morning's soup. Leftover rice turns into crispy fried cakes, sometimes mixed with grated sweet potato and bound with egg. A banana leaf is always within reach, ready to serve as plate, steamer, or wrapping. You disembark at a trading outpost with streets so narrow, 2 carts can T-pass without a negotiation. And here, at the edge of the known world, people eat like they've been everywhere because their ancestors have. One cart sells Indian-style curries with flatbread, while another offers spicy stir-fried noodles with soy-glazed tofu. A nearby cafe serves saffron-scented rice pudding dusted with cinnamon. None of it feels like fusion eat. You watch a woman cooking over a clay stove, flipping puffed rice cakes and topping them with crushed peanuts and palm sugar. It's a snack, a breakfast, a dessert, whatever you need it to be. You take one, still warm, and bite down. It shatters in your mouth like sweet, crispy glass. And the rice. Oh, the rice. Now it appears as fermented rice pancakes, rice noodles, sweet rice cakes filled with black sesame, and savory rice balls, seasoned with anchovy powder and chili oil. Each region molds it to its will, but it never loses its quiet strength. It's the unspoken heartbeat of the Silk Road, diet adaptable, humble, sustaining. You're invited to a coastal wedding feast, perhaps by chance, perhaps because you look convincingly dusty and hungry. The meal is celebratory, excessive, full of laughter and clinking bowls. Platters of braised duck with 5-spice pineapple and tamarind stews, crispy shrimp pancakes, and pickled mango slices circle the room. There's a small bowl of fermented shrimp paste. No one dares approach too boldly, except you. You dip a piece of steamed cassava in and try it. It knocks your socks off. Everyone cheers. During a lull in the festivities, an old man tells you that his great-grandfather once traded sugar, pearls, and vinegar with merchants from across the sea. We didn't have a word for foreign food, he says with a smile. Only new food. Historians still argue whether this openness was economic necessity or cultural curiosity, probably both. But here, now, it simply feels like a way of life. One plate handed to the next, 1,000 flavors forming a single story. And your own story. It now stretches from goat cheese in Samarkand to candied ginger by the sea. You've eaten the Silk Road, bite by bite, and its map is etched into your memory by flavor. As night falls, you sit once more beneath a canopy of stars, different stars from where you began, but familiar now. You hold a warm cup of fermented rice wine and a small bowl of sweet coconut pudding. Around you, people eat, talk, share. No one's in a hurry. The wind rustles the banana leaves. The waves lap gently at the shore. You've walked through deserts, climbed mountains, crossed rivers, and stepped into kitchens filled with spice, smoke, and laughter. And now, at the water's edge, you finally pause. You're not full. You're complete. The journey quiets now. The sea hushes, and the breeze falls still, like a held breath before sleep. You lie back on a wooden deck warmed by the day's sun, your head cushioned by a folded cloth, your body softened by good food and long stories. The sky stretches above, you dark velvet pricked with silver, and the world finally feels calm. Your mind drifts, retracing the journey, the soft crunch of pickled vegetables, the steam rising from noodle broth, the first bite of honeyed cake on a cold desert night, the echoes of markets and kitchens, the warmth of strangers sharing their table, the surprise of discovering just how far rice, garlic, and ginger can take you. Each dish, each stop, each flavor woven together like threads in a grand, quiet tapestry. And now, the road recedes. The bells of camels are just memory. The sizzle of oil in a far-off wok fades to a murmur. Even the strongest spice softens in your mouth, leaving behind only comfort. You feel the softness in your muscles now, that gentle ache that comes from walking far and eating well. The stars shift above you, your breath slows. And so, the journey ends not with a bang or a final bite, but with a gentle exhale. Like steam escaping from a bamboo steamer, you're warm, you're safe. You've eaten the world one story at a time, and now let sleep carry you.